Bugatti has always existed in a category that feels less like automotive manufacturing and more like engineering mythology. From the rebirth under Volkswagen Group ownership to the creation of the legendary Veyron, and later the Chiron, the brand built its identity on one core idea: extreme mechanical perfection without compromise. At the center of that identity stood the W16 engine, a configuration so complex and ambitious that it became more than a power unit. It became the emotional signature of the entire company. For over 2 decades under Volkswagen Group, Bugatti was not simply a brand chasing profit. It was a technological monument designed to prove what engineering could achieve when cost was not a limitation. The Veyron alone reportedly operated at massive financial loss per unit, yet it served a different purpose: prestige, dominance, and proof of capability. That philosophy shaped every bolt inside the factory in Motium, where engineers worked not like typical automotive employees, but like artisans preserving a mechanical tradition that felt almost sacred. But everything began shifting when the ownership structure changed, and control gradually moved toward a new vision led by mate Rimac through a joint venture with Porsche. This was not just a corporate restructuring. It was a philosophical collision between 2 eras of automotive thinking. On one side stood engineers who had spent their entire careers refining combustion perfection inside the Volkswagen ecosystem. On the other stood a visionary whose identity was built entirely on electrification, software integration, and next-generation performance systems. The tension was subtle at first, not expressed through public conflict, but through design direction, internal priorities, and long-term product strategy. What once revolved around maximizing combustion refinement slowly began to shift toward hybridization and future electrification. Inside this transformation, many long-term engineers reportedly began reassessing their place in the company, not necessarily due to dissatisfaction, but due to a growing sense that the foundational philosophy of Bugatti was no longer anchored in the world they had mastered. For them, the W16 was not just an engine. It was a career-long pursuit of perfection. And when an organization begins transitioning away from that core identity, even gradually, it creates a silent cultural divergence that cannot easily be reversed. The question was no longer just what Bugatti would build next, but whether the people who defined its past still belonged in its future. The turning point in Bugatti's modern history is often traced to the formal restructuring that brought Rimac Automobili into direct partnership with Porsche and Volkswagen interests, effectively merging 2 fundamentally different automotive philosophies into a single strategic direction. On paper, the move was presented as innovation meeting tradition, an alliance that would preserve Bugatti's heritage while preparing it for an electrified future. But inside the engineering culture, such transitions are never purely symbolic. They reshape decision-making authority, redefine project priorities, and ultimately influence which type of engineering thinking is rewarded. For a company like Bugatti, where identity is deeply tied to mechanical heritage, even subtle shifts in leadership philosophy can create profound internal consequences. The engineers who had built the W16-era cars like the Veyron and Chiron were trained in a mindset that valued mechanical complexity, thermal endurance, and combustion efficiency at extreme performance levels. Their work was defined by physical engineering constraints: heat management, airflow optimization, material endurance, and mechanical reliability at speeds exceeding anything previously attempted in production vehicles. This was not software-driven engineering. It was tactile, physical, and deeply analog in execution. When the organizational direction began leaning toward hybrid systems and electrified performance platforms, the core skill set that defined these engineers started to feel less central to future projects. This does not imply obsolescence in technical terms, but it does affect psychological ownership of a brand's direction. At the same time, new leadership under mate Rimac brought a different kind of confidence, one rooted in the belief that electrification does not dilute performance but amplifies it. In this worldview, the future of hypercars is not defined by the sound of combustion engines, but by acceleration, efficiency, and software-controlled precision. The introduction of hybrid systems like those seen in the new tourbillon concept represented not just a technological evolution, but a philosophical rewrite of what Bugatti stands for. Instead of pure combustion engineering being the center of identity, it became one component within a larger hybrid system. For some engineers, this evolution was exciting and intellectually stimulating. For others, It represented a gradual distancing from the craft they had dedicated decades to perfecting. The result was not immediate departure or visible conflict, but something quieter and more complex, a slow recalibration of belonging. And in high-performance engineering environments, when that sense of belonging begins to fade, movement eventually follows, whether toward retirement, consulting, or entirely new automotive ventures. The decline of the W16 era inside Bugatti was not an abrupt ending, but a carefully managed transition that unfolded over several years, gradually reshaping the identity of the brand without a single defining moment of rupture. The W16 engine, developed and refined under the Volkswagen era, represented one of the most complex internal combustion systems ever placed in a production car. It powered icons like the Veyron and Chiron, and in doing so, it became more than just machinery. It became the emotional core of Bugatti's modern identity. For engineers who had spent decades working on thermal efficiency, quad turbocharging systems, and extreme speed stability, the W16 was not just a project, but a lifelong technical journey. As the company moved toward hybrid and electrified architectures under the influence of Mate Rimac and the broader strategy of Rimac Automobili, that journey naturally began to reach its final phase. What made this transition emotionally complex was not the removal of the engine itself, but what it represented, the end of the shared engineering language. The W16 was built on principles of mechanical intensity, airflow precision, combustion timing, turbocharging synchronization, and heat dissipation at extreme loads. Every system inside the car revolved around supporting that single mechanical heart. When development began shifting toward hybrid systems like those seen in the tourbillon concept, engineers were subtly asked to integrate electrical systems, energy recovery technologies, and software-driven torque distribution into a philosophy that had historically been purely mechanical. This shift did not eliminate expertise, but it redistributed importance across new domains, changing how success was measured inside the company as this evolution progressed. The emotional attachment to the W16 became more visible in automotive culture outside the factory than inside official communications. Enthusiasts and collectors began treating the final generations of the Chiron as historical artifacts rather than simply high-performance vehicles. Limited production numbers, rising secondary market values, and increasing demand for low-mileage examples all contributed to perception that an era was ending inside the company. However, the focus was forward-looking. The goal was not to preserve the past indefinitely, but to ensure Bugatti's survival in a world rapidly moving toward electrification and hybrid performance systems. The introduction of Bugatti's next-generation direction, particularly the tourbillon project, marked a definitive philosophical break from the combustion-dominated identity that had defined the brand for over 2 decades. Developed under the strategic vision associated with Mate Rimac and engineered in collaboration with partners, including Cosworth, the new architecture combined a naturally aspirated V16 engine with advanced hybrid electric systems. This combination was not merely a technical upgrade. It was a complete redefinition of what a Bugatti powertrain represents. Instead of relying solely on internal combustion to deliver performance, the system integrates electric motors that enhance acceleration, responsiveness, and efficiency in ways that were previously impossible under traditional engineering constraints. For longtime Bugatti engineers, this represented both a challenge and a transformation of identity. The V16 engine itself was already a departure from the iconic W16, signaling that even the core mechanical philosophy was evolving. But the addition of hybrid systems introduced a new layer of complexity that required collaboration between disciplines that had historically operated separately. Mechanical engineering, electrical systems, and software control logic now had to function as a unified system rather than isolated specialties. This shift reflects a broader trend across the hypercar industry, where raw combustion power alone is no longer sufficient to define performance leadership. The reaction within the automotive community has been divided. Some view the tourbillon as the most advanced Bugatti ever created, a machine that pushes performance boundaries further than any predecessor. Others see it as a symbolic departure from the purity of the W16 era, arguing that while the numbers may be superior, the emotional character has fundamentally changed. This debate is not simply about horsepower or speed. It is about identity. What defines a Bugatti, the sound, the mechanical complexity, or the technological achievement? Under the new direction, That question has no single answer, and perhaps that is the point. The brand is no longer anchored in one philosophy, but is instead navigating between heritage and innovation as Bugatti moved deeper into its hybrid future. The conversation around engineer departures became one of the most debated and misunderstood aspects of its transformation. Within the automotive world, especially among enthusiasts, there is often a tendency to interpret cultural change inside a legendary brand as a dramatic exodus, but the reality is usually more gradual and far less theatrical. In the case of Bugatti, what occurred was not a single wave of engineers abandoning the company, but a slow redistribution of talent influenced by retirement cycles, career progression, and shifting project focus. Many of the engineers who had worked on the W16 program had already spent decades refining one of the most complex combustion systems ever created, and naturally, some reached the end of their professional journeys around the same time the company itself began transitioning toward electrified performance under the direction associated with Mate Rimac and the strategic framework of Rimac Automobile. What made the perception of engineers leaving more pronounced was a symbolic weight attached to the W16 engine itself. Because the W16 was not just another powertrain, but the defining identity of modern Bugatti, any reduction in its development naturally felt like the disappearance of the people who mastered it. In reality, however, engineering organizations evolve constantly. Specialists often transition into consultancy roles, internal research divisions, or broader Volkswagen Group projects where their expertise remains valuable. Some move to competing hypercar manufacturers, while others shift toward emerging EV startups or advanced mobility research. These movements are normal in the automotive industry, but within the context of Bugatti's legacy, they are interpreted through a more emotional lens. The deeper truth lies in how identity shifts inside a company that is undergoing philosophical transformation. When Bugatti was centered entirely around combustion engineering, every major decision revolved around optimizing physical performance limits. Engineers were rewarded for mastering heat, pressure, airflow, and mechanical endurance at extremes that no other production car attempted. As the focus shifts toward hybrid systems, software integration, and electrification, the definition of core engineering excellence expands. This does not diminish the importance of legacy knowledge, but it does redistribute influence across new domains. That redistribution is what creates a perception of departure, even when the organization remains largely intact. Beyond the engineering floor, the cultural impact of Bugatti's transformation became most visible among collectors, enthusiasts, and industry observers who had long associated the brand with mechanical purity and uncompromising combustion performance. For this audience, the W16 engine represented more than just an engineering achievement. It represented a philosophy of excess, precision, and individuality that no other automotive manufacturer had replicated at the same level. Vehicles like the Veyron and Chiron were not simply hypercars. They were symbols of a mechanical era that prioritized physical engineering mastery over digital augmentation. As production of the final Chiron units concluded and the W16 era came to a close, many enthusiasts began to treat these cars as historical milestones rather than contemporary machines. The introduction of the next-generation Bugatti, particularly the Tourbillon project developed under the leadership direction of Mate Rimac in collaboration with engineering partners such as Cosworth, intensified this emotional divide. On one hand, the new hybrid V16 platform represents an unprecedented level of performance, combining internal combustion with advanced electric propulsion systems that deliver greater total output than any previous Bugatti. On the other hand, it marks a departure from the singular mechanical identity that defined the brand for over 20 years. This duality has created a split perception, technical admiration versus emotional nostalgia. In the collector market, this tension has translated into a noticeable shift in value perception. Limited production W16 models, particularly low-mileage Chiron variants, have seen increasing demand as buyers begin to view them as a final expression of an unrepeatable engineering philosophy. Meanwhile, anticipation for the new hybrid era continues to grow among a different segment of buyers who value technological advancement and future-oriented performance. This divergence reflects a broader trend in the hypercar world, where identity is no longer defined by a single engine type, but by the integration of multiple technologies working together to achieve extreme performance outcomes. Ultimately, Bugatti now exists in a transitional space between heritage and innovation. It is no longer solely defined by the combustion mastery of the past, nor entirely by the electrified future it is moving toward. Instead, it stands at the intersection of both worlds, carrying forward the legacy of the W16 while simultaneously building a new identity shaped by hybrid engineering. Whether this transformation is viewed as loss or progress depends entirely on perspective, but what is undeniable is that Bugatti has entered a fundamentally new era, one that will define its next chapter in automotive history. The debate over whether Bugatti has lost something essential or simply evolved into a new form ultimately comes down to how one defines the soul of a hypercar brand. For decades, Bugatti's identity was inseparable from the W16 engine, a mechanical masterpiece that represented the absolute peak of internal combustion engineering. It was not just about power figures or top speed records. It was about the philosophy behind the machine, an obsessive pursuit of perfection where cost, complexity, and practicality were secondary to engineering ambition. Under the long influence of Volkswagen Group, this philosophy was protected and pushed extremes, resulting in vehicles like the Veyron and Chiron that existed more as engineering statements than commercial products. But as the automotive industry entered a new era defined by electrification, software control, and hybrid performance systems, the foundation of that philosophy began to shift toward a new direction shaped by Mate Rimac and the technological framework of Rimac Automobili. This transition did not happen through sudden disruption, but through a layered transformation priorities, design philosophies, and long-term goals. The introduction of hybrid systems, particularly in the next-generation Bugatti projects, represents a fundamental rethinking of what performance means in the modern age. Instead of relying solely on combustion engines to deliver speed and acceleration, engineers now integrate electric motors that enhance torque delivery, improve responsiveness, and allow for entirely new performance characteristics that were previously impossible. This shift expands the definition of engineering excellence from purely mechanical achievement to a fusion of mechanical and digital intelligence. For some, this is an exciting evolution that opens the door to new possibilities. For others, it represents a departure from the purity that defined Bugatti's golden era. The emotional weight of this change is amplified by the symbolic end of the W16 era. When the final generation of the Chiron concluded production, it marked not only the end of a model line, but a conclusion of an engineering philosophy that had defined the brand for over 20 years. The W16 was more than an engine. It was a centerpiece of Bugatti's identity, a unifying force that connected every aspect of design, performance, and brand perception. Its retirement naturally created a sense of closure, even as new projects promised even greater technical achievements. This is where the tension in Bugatti's modern story becomes most visible. Progress requires change, but change inevitably alters identity. Looking forward, Bugatti's future is no longer centered around a single defining engine or a singular mechanical philosophy. Instead, it is being shaped by a broader vision that integrates multiple technologies into a unified performance system. The Tourbillon project, developed under the strategic leadership direction associated with Mate Rimac and engineered in collaboration with specialists such as Cosworth, represents this new direction in its most complete form. With a naturally aspirated V16 engine combined with hybrid electric systems, the vehicle does not simply replace the W16. It redefines what a Bugatti powertrain can be. It introduces a layered performance structure where combustion and electrification coexist, each contributing to different aspects of driving dynamics, from high-speed stability to instant torque response. This approach reflects a broader industry transformation in which hypercar manufacturers are no longer competing solely on engine output or top speed, but on the sophistication of their integrated systems. Software now plays a critical role in managing performance, distributing power, and optimizing efficiency in real time. This represents a significant departure from the purely mechanical engineering culture that defined Bugatti during the W16 era. For traditionalists, this shift can feel like a loss of mechanical purity. For modern engineers and designers, it represents a necessary evolution that aligns with global trends in sustainability, performance efficiency, and technological integration. Despite the philosophical divide, one fact remains consistent. Bugatti continues to operate at the highest level of automotive engineering ambition. Whether powered by the W16 or a hybrid V16 system, the brand maintains its commitment to extreme performance and exclusivity. The difference lies in how that performance is achieved. The past was defined by mechanical extremes pushed to their absolute limits. The future will be defined by the intelligent combination of multiple systems working in harmony. In this sense, Bugatti has not abandoned its pursuit of perfection. It has simply changed the tools it uses to reach it. In the end, Bugatti's story is not one of loss or destruction, but transformation under pressure from both technological evolution and corporate realignment. The shift from a W16-dominated identity to a hybrid-driven future reflects a broader reality facing the entire automotive industry. The age of pure internal combustion is ending, and with it, the philosophies that define an entire generation of engineering excellence are being reinterpreted. Under the ownership structure involving Volkswagen Group and the strategic influence of Rimac Automobili led by mate Rimac, Bugatti is attempting something rare in automotive history, preserving legacy while simultaneously rewriting it. For enthusiasts, this creates an emotional paradox. The sound of the W16, the mechanical complexity of the Veyron and Chiron, and the era they represent will never be replicated in the same form again. That chapter is closed. Yet what replaces it is not a downgrade, but a redefinition. One that pushes performance boundaries further than ever before while integrating technologies that align with the future of mobility. The tension between these two realities is what makes Bugatti's current era so compelling. It is not a simple story of replacement, but a layered evolution where every gain comes with a corresponding sense of loss. Ultimately, Bugatti's identity now exists in two timelines at once: the mechanical legacy of the past and the hybrid innovation of the future. Whether this dual identity is viewed as progress or departure depends on perspective. But what cannot be denied is that the brand continues to operate at the very edge of what automotive engineering can achieve. The W16 era may have ended, but the spirit of pushing boundaries remains intact. Only now, it is expressed through a different technological language. And in that sense, Bugatti has not ended. It has transformed into something new, carrying its history forward while stepping into an entirely different future. If you zoom out far enough from Bugatti's story, what you are really watching is not just the evolution of a car company, but the transition of an entire philosophy of engineering across generations. The W16 did not simply disappear because it was outdated. It disappeared because the world around it changed faster than the environment that created it. In the era of Volkswagen Group, Bugatti was allowed to exist as a celebration of mechanical excess, where engineering ambition mattered more than financial logic. But under the new direction influenced by mate Rimac and the technological ecosystem of Rimac Automobili, the definition of performance has expanded beyond combustion itself. It is no longer just about how much power an engine can produce, but how intelligently that power is delivered, controlled, and enhanced through hybrid systems and software integration. For the engineers who lived through the W16 era, this shift represents both an achievement and a farewell. Because even if the future brings faster cars, more advanced systems, and higher efficiency, it will never replicate the exact feeling of what it meant to build something like the Veyron or Chiron from pure mechanical ambition. And that is why Bugatti's transformation feels so emotional to enthusiasts, not because the brand is disappearing, but because it is moving forward in a direction where its past can no longer be physically recreated, only remembered as a peak of an era that defined what was once thought impossible in automotive history. In the end, Bugatti's story is no longer just about horsepower, engines, or records. It is about identity under transformation. The W16 era did not disappear because it was weak, outdated, or defeated. It ended because the world that created it moved on to a different definition of performance. Under the influence of Volkswagen Group and the new direction shaped by mate Rimac, through Rimac Automobili, Bugatti has stepped into a future where intelligence, hybrid systems, and electrification now sit beside mechanical tradition. But for those who witness a rise of the W16, this shift will always feel emotional, because it represents the end of the sound, of feeling, and engineering language that can never be recreated in the same way again. Bugatti has not disappeared. It has evolved, but evolution always comes with a silent cost. And the real question is not whether the new Bugatti is better, but whether anything that comes after can ever truly replace what it once was.